Welcome to the second episode of Keystones Expedition, where I am following a trail across Southern Africa from Cape Town through to Arusha, and then from there I have absolutely no idea. There's plans potentially to go to the Congo. To give you a quick update on Keystones. Keystones is looking at keystone projects, keystone individuals, and keystone spaces, much like the last project on Eden to Addo corridor, which looked at the corridor initiative there. This time, I'm sitting in the Majete Wildlife Reserve here in Malawi with John, who is the park manager. But yeah, John, would you just say who you are, where you're working, and what your role is at park?
Okay, Sam, welcome to Majete, one of the better stories on the African landscape. But myself, I grew up in the Kruger National Park. My name is John Adendorff. Father was in conservation for many years, over 30 years in Kruger. And then I personally moved on and did my military service and studied in Pretoria. And then went on to work in Addo Elephant Park as a student, and then junior ranger. And I ended my career in Addo after 28 years in 2019. Came and joined African Parks. A lot of the African Parks folk are ex-SAM Parks people, and also KZN, from the KZN KwaZulu-Natal. But I've been here for 6 years now. Pretty much conservation is my lifestyle and career of choice. Did a lot of really good work in Addo with a lot of very good people. Anthony Martin was one of the founding members for Addo, who saw Addo grow exponentially from about 11,000 hectares to when I left it was 172,000 hectares. And when he left Sandparks, he started with Peter Fernhead and a couple of other members. They started African Parks in 2000. And this was their first park, Majete Wildlife Reserve. And Anthony basically went from Addo all the way to Malawi. His early career was in Malawi, and he studied in Lwande, he did an elephant study there. So he had a close affiliation with Malawi, and this would naturally be the first country that they targeted for conservation and managing a government asset in partnership with the government of Malawi. Majete was not first choice. They wanted to get a hold of Lwande, which is a national park and significant park within the context of Malawi. But in the day, back in 2003, a gentleman by the name of Leonard Sefu, who was the parks director at the time, they agreed that they should take over this little unknown reserve called Majete. And that's it's an incredible story. But I can relate to, if you like. And
yes, I mean, just to give some context, I had no idea about Majete before even coming. I mean, I've heard loads about African Parks in my career, with Rewild Africa, etc. As a cornerstone or a keystone project that's making a huge impact across Africa as a management company, and I've just been bowled over by the story of this reserve, and I would just love for you to please share with anyone the story, actually, when did it start, the project, all the way towards where we are to current day. Please.
So it's an incredible story, and it's one of those that gives you hope, and it's a story of resilience, and it definitely gives you hope for the future. A lot of people, we're in a world today where there's a lot of doomsday prophets and a lot of negativity around us. But Majete is that story on the African continent that shows it can be done, and it's started off from very humble beginnings where there was nothing left on the landscape. The people in the know, there was a gentleman, Tom Turner, who now lives in the Western Cape. He was the first park manager. Tom relayed to me how you would walk around Majete and the spider webs were everywhere and nothing was breaking the spider webs, which meant there was no animals on the landscape. The bush had gone quiet, the birds had gone quiet, and I think in the day it was, I think we're very brave on AP to take on the project. There was a lot of logging as well taking place, and we can see across the African or Malawi landscape how logging has affected the natural vegetation, and a lot of it's been logged, and you very seldom see any indigenous bush. Majete, it was the beginning stages of that, and you can see it on the outskirts of the boundary where people were coming in, and they go for all the hardwoods, the leadwoods. We've got a Miamba woodland here, which has got a fair amount of trees. It's actually an incredible park for trees. And once the logging starts, it's a very quick, slippery path to total destruction. But one of the first things they did was put up a fence, and they started a sanctuary. The sanctuary is about 12,000 hectares. The total reserve size is 72,000 hectares, but they decided to isolate an area of 12,000 and then started moving animals. There was a little remnant herd of elephants along the lake shore in Malawai Lake that were being absolutely persecuted. They were on death row. Hey, every day they were being shot at, and every one of those animals had scars when it arrived in Majete. Those animals were caught and brought to Majete. Rhinos were brought from South Africa. We've had lions brought from South Africa. The hyena were naturally on the landscape, but leopard had to be brought from South Africa. Cheetah brought from South Africa. Giraffe brought from South Africa. Every animal had to be reintroduced into the park. So in early days, there was a lot of hardship. There was the infrastructure you see now is a far cry from what they had in the early days. It was 1 or 2 buildings that they had to make do with. And management, we used to get together at Ngono Lodge, which is a little lodge down way from here, where they would basically plan and how they're going to make this work. It was all trial and error, no proper guidance on how we're going to do it. I really take my hat off to those folk in the early days. It must have been really daunting and difficult. Put the right team in place. People are everything. If you've got the right people, you will succeed. Today we've got an incredibly motivated and dedicated team that operates in Majete. But if you go to the early days, there were very few staff. We started with 12 staff members. Today we have 178 staff members. We employ casual labor from all around the park, and that's our success. We've got incredibly good community relations as well. So the approach was law enforcement and fencing first, so that's your first line of defense. So you stop the human-wildlife conflict. And then the second phase would be to train a good ranger team up to manage the reserve and keep the animals safe within the reserve. And the third phase to it was getting a good community extension program running outside of the reserve, which, at the end of the day, if humans don't have buy-in into it and communities don't have buy-in, you will never succeed. And we realized that from a very early stage. And we pride ourselves in that you can go into any community around Majete, you can leave your doors open, you're safe, you're welcomed. This is one of the biggest enterprises in the Lower Sherry. And a lot of people, in some way or other, benefit from this park being in existence and being in the Lower Sherry. Like I said, 178 staff members, and you can bet that money goes into the community and local economy, and it uplifts the local economy as well. But besides that, over time, we've drilled boreholes, we've provided potable water, we've put in agriculture, we've got fish farms, we've got bee apiaries. This year we should be able to produce about 8 tons of honey. We have also gone out and built clinics, and we've got a partnership with the Hunger Project, where we've got 6 epicenters that have a clinic, a creche, a little maize mill, a library, a community bank, and a community hall. And these become the centers for these communities where they can actually do business and also skills upliftment. So a lot of training takes place, and AP provides that avenue for training. We generally bring the community into the management of the reserve. So we have CBOs, which is community business organizations. We help uplift those. Those community business organizations then form part of the Majete Wildlife Reserve Association, which meets quarterly. That also brings on board the traditional structure. There's 6 traditional authorities around Majete, and it's really important to recognize the historic structures within an area like this. And I think that's what our success is. We absolutely respect the people around the reserve, and we jointly bring them on board and let them participate in how we manage this reserve. And then the last group that we deal with is the JLC, the Joint Liaison Committee, which is all the politicians, the judiciary, and they also have a opportunity to comment on our developments and how we operate within the park, and it gives us an opportunity to interact and try and refine some of the issues that we have, and be it on the judiciary side of things, prosecution. But we find we've got incredible buy-in. It's a really good space to be in 20 years later, and it's gone through its ups and downs, and there have been massive challenges over the years. But I would go as far as to say it must be one of the top 5 reserves on the African landscape, where you have everything synchronized with the communities, the tourism product that's now starting to, it's very young still. We're putting a lot of effort into tourism, and ultimately we want to see tourism succeed and this park become sustainable. We're a non-profit organization. Every dollar spent is either from a donor or generated by ourselves. We've got a substantial budget that we have to cover every year. 25% of that comes from tourism, and the rest comes from very, very loyal donors that support us. But ultimately, if we are to succeed into the long term, we need to make it sustainable, and the tourism product's got to grow, and we've got to look at other avenues like carbon credits, and see how we can diversify the products so we can get the best return on the product. At the end of the day, it's a business, and it's got to provide for the people around Majete. And I think one of the big challenges for us going forward is to retain emotional ownership. The population is growing exponentially, as it is growing across Africa. And our big concern is, how do you retain emotional ownership? And it's going to take a lot of effort.
Can you double down on what emotional ownership is?
So emotional ownership is actually buying into the product and understanding what we're all about, and a critical understanding. So you could also describe it as creating ambassadors that will protect this area going forward. You know, AP is here on contract, and our contract will expire at some point. And then we want to know that we've benefited the communities to such an extent that they will protect this, and it will be there for future generations. So that we got a long way to go yet. And once we reach sustainability, it will prove to the people around you that this is a product that can really work, and it needs to be protected at all costs. Your success lies in your community policing. Hey, if you don't have community policing, you will continue to try and protect an area like this, but eventually you will fail. The community policing is that ownership, and then emotional ownership. Once the community realizes the benefit of an area like this, and they're prepared to protect it, and keep syndicates and syndicate crime out of the area, and understand that conservation actually pays and is a benefit to the community, you're really in a good space. And I think if I had to give it a percentage, I would say we're 60% of the way there. When you drive around Majete, it really is incredible. You get out of a vehicle and people absolutely love Majete and what we've done for the communities around Majete. But yeah, like I say, the population is growing, and it's important we keep everybody invested in the reserve.
What I really love about Africa Parks, from curiously learning and observing, is that it is almost a management company, where it's coming in and it's looking at the issue of biodiversity loss, and trying to manage for that issue. I mean, this park literally, as you said, 20 years ago had nothing here, and the wildlife is what builds the economy, such as tourism and the honey projects, etc. For you, as someone who's worked in conservation so long, what does it feel to be part of a project that is seen such a growth in ecological diversity, and what benefits can you see for surrounding communities when, just looking at that timescale, you've been able to see quite a bit of that difference over 6 years, I think.
Yeah. So I think for most of us in conservation, it's a passion. It's a different type of job to any 9-to-5 job. And a lot of us have been in it for the long haul, and the working environment can be a challenge. But to be able to work for African Parks, who invests in a sustainable solution. We ultimately want to see biodiversity succeed, but it's critical for us to get the communities involved and educate people that it's worth protecting these areas. And I think the model that AP follows is one of the best ones I've seen. If I distance myself from AP and I look around what is out there, and it is definitely a model that works. And to me, it's the only model. You need to come in as a management company and pass on your skill set. It's about training, it's about mentoring, it's about supporting governments in Africa, giving them the support and skill set to actually protect these areas, and also letting people understand that it can be a business in its own right, and a business that is sustainable and that can benefit communities within the areas that these parks are in. So for me, I often say I don't really wear the AP badge. It's a passion and it's an absolute commitment to the cause. And AP fits that model perfectly for me. I'm extremely proud to be part of the African Parks program. And it's rolling out across Africa. We've got 22 parks, and that's in less than, 21 years now. We've got 22 parks. So it's an incredible growth and it's an incredible success. And some parks are more challenging than others, but we've taken on the challenge. And those parks, most of them are critical parks that need to be conserved on the African landscape.
And the reintroduction of some of the species here, I mean, can you speak to some of like the translocation of the elephants that were done here, and how that this is almost like projects like this is like almost like a feeding project to the development of other parks within AP or other parks in general?
So I think we pretty much Majete and Lwandi and parks in Malawi, we've moved the most elephants on the African continent. It's over 1,000 elephants moved already. Those in the know will know it's an incredibly difficult task to move elephants. You need equipment, and the equipment's not available in Malawi, so we've got a team of operators in South Africa that come across with all the infrastructure, and be it trucks and recovery vehicles and helicopters. It's a major mission here, and it costs a fortune to do an exercise like that. And to be able to stand back and say we've moved over 1,000 elephants, it's really, and each one of them was done for conservation reasons, and it's restocking of areas. So on the elephants landscape, we've done incredibly well, and that's rolled out to other reserves across Africa. AP is currently involved with the John Hume project, where we're moving over 2,000 rhinos. I think the organisation is bold, and we're prepared to take on the challenges, but it's all for the betterment of conservation on the African landscape. We realise that African countries need the support and help, and often when you get into a country like Malawi, there's no animals to choose from anymore. So there were no lions to be found in Malawi. There were no wild dogs to be found in Malawi. There were no cheetahs to be found in Malawi. There was no giraffe. And these animals at great expense had to be brought from different countries, but mostly South Africa. We've brought animals from Zimbabwe as well. But bringing rhino, for instance, it's a major mission, and the care that goes with that, it's the start to the actual capture, and you've got to put animals in bomas, you've got to get them habituated. That's months of work, and then you eventually get to the day where you can transport them. And then when they get here, in recent times, you release straight into the veld. But back in the day, you had to build big bomas. You had to take care of these animals for a good couple of weeks before you could release them. In Majete, we continue to have a superb rhino effort. We don't talk about rhino too much these days, but what I can say is the people we've trained and the skill set is some of the best I've seen anywhere on the African continent. Our teams are highly motivated, incredibly good at what they do. We try and track every single animal within a given month. And I haven't really spoken about the ranger team out there. They're the selfish, or not the selfish, unselfish team that goes out into the field. Doesn't matter if it's raining or sunshine, if it's cold or if it's cyclone conditions. they're out there, and it's a really skilled team that does incredible work on the landscape. What is really nice about our efforts is that our extension people, or community development program, and our ranger corps work hand in hand. We often go into the communities with our ranger team, and we do education, and we have a thing called Umuganda, which resonates from Rwanda, where we're able to go into the communities and work with communities. And there's no ill feelings towards rangers, and things are in a good space when you've got that. Rangers can freely walk in the communities, and if there's any intention to poach, we often hear from the communities. They're the ones telling us, be careful of this individual or careful of that individual. So they're the eyes and ears for us, and I think that puts us in a really good space. But going back to the wildlife introduction, it's been an incredible story. It started, first animals were elephant, and then we had some rhino and buffalo. We introduced buffalo to Majete, a small herd, and today there's over 2,000 buffalo in Majete. We introduced a small herd of sable. Today there's over 2,000 sable in Majete. We've managed to reintroduce animals to other reserves. So the park has done so well that we've taken out eland, we've taken out elephant, we've taken out hartebeest, we've taken out kudu, we've taken out warthogs, impala, and that's helped restock the rest of Malawi. So in 20 years, I've got to pinch myself. I still get gooseflesh when I talk about this. It's an amazing, amazing story. And to see it rise from nothing, and absolutely a sterile environment, all that was remained with the forested trees, and even they were being logged and chopped down. But today we have this thriving, you drive around, and it's known in Malawi as the premier reserve now. Hey, it's a little reserve, it's not even a national park. And it is the premier reserve in Malawi. It's got the most diverse species. It's got the biggest predator yield in the country. It's, up until recently, was the only reserve with wild dog. Lwande has recently put wild dog in as well. We've managed to take wild dog out of Majete and send them back to South Africa as part of the EWT program, where they will restock other areas in Africa. It's been ongoing. We're pretty much at that point now where we don't really need any more species. The wild dogs were the last ones to be introduced, the wild dogs and the cheetah. And now it's just managing those species. I think our very success could also be your downfall if you don't manage predators properly. We've got a fence around the reserve, so we've got to manage that. So recently we also started with a contraception program and vasectomies on the male lions. And we work very closely with our government partners, and they approve of our methods. And like the vasectomies, we can reverse and we can move these lions in time if there are areas in Malawi that need lions. But right now we're finding it a challenge to move lions, so we've got a fence around. You need a fence around a reserve. The main thing we try and avoid is human-wildlife conflict. You don't want to upset communities, so we don't want to be irresponsible and move animals if they're not being protected, and also from the animal welfare point of view. And the other thing is we don't want to have compromised people out there. We've realized that from the early days that people are our success. If you don't have motivated people outside of the reserve and staff, you are not going to succeed.
No, and that's why it really is a Keystone project in terms of as a success story. And thank you so much for sharing all of that, because I've also been really inspired by it. It's also nice to hear some more about it. I think success is, it's complex. There's complexity in success. Obviously what I mean by that is, the social success, the ecological success, the ability to engage with communities on a project like this is hugely successful, because I guess there's no ecological sustainability without social sustainability first, and that buy-in from the communities, as you say, is just such a thing to be learnt across, I guess, various conservation projects in Africa, and with AP itself. I'm sure AP is learning a lot from Majete within the development of new parks, or their parks that are existing in itself. Would you be able to just describe a little bit about when AP started? How long ago did Africa Park start?
Yeah, so it's that, look, it was 2000 basically, and they sat around a table, Mvusi Mzimana, Mike Eustace, Peter Ferned, and Anthony or Martin, and they concocted this idea to support African governments. I think at that stage it was quite daunting, but they knew that Africa was struggling, and finance is not always available to manage these parks, and the support structures aren't there. And they saw a niche in the market to go out there and support Africa, and in a very worthwhile cause. I think it's a learning curve, a massive one. I find even in my 6 years, I come from a 28-year Sam Parks background, and you think you knew it all, but I honestly walked in and very quickly realized, especially on the community side of things and the interaction, one has got so much to learn. And I think the old school way of conserving is type of a fortress that you put in place, and that does not work. You have to have that participation. So if I often say that if I go back to South Africa and I practice conservation there, I'll change my mindset completely. One of the first things you do is you get the communities on board and get them to own the product and own what you're doing, and get everybody with a vision and following the same set of goals. And once you've got that, you're in a very good space.
I'm going to change tact in the conversation a little bit, and I feel like we've got a nice holistic idea of Majete and African parks. I just want to come back a little bit to you as an individual, and what made you want to get into conservation, and maybe because I really want people outside of nature-loving people to listen and learn and just get some context to why people become who they are, and I'm just very curious to hear a little bit of your story.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, and I often put it to colleagues, and how do you create passion, and because different generations deal with things differently. But I come from a generation where we would go camp out and we'd be in the bush all the time, and we didn't have the cell phones and we didn't have anything like that. So every spare moment, I'm fortunate, I grew up in a place like Kruger, so I suppose in a way it's a privileged lifestyle. But from a very early age, learned to appreciate nature and the small things in life. Even today still, I love my elephants, and if people ask me what's my favorite animal, they all are, but elephants are definitely right out there because of Addo and all the years I spent there. But what is key about myself is that I pay attention to every little detail. The small things in life matter. The little ants and the termites and the geckos. And when I got to Majete, it was a lonely life. I was on my own, and I got to know my geckos personally by name in my house. But it's that attention to detail and being totally in touch with the environment. And once you've created that passion, then it's a worthy cause to actually go out and fight for. And I could do nothing else. I often think I've got limited skill sets. If I had to pack up in Africa, what else would I do? Because this is all I know. But I think I see it with my two daughters. They've got the same passion from a very early age in the bush and camping and fishing and doing hikes and exploring. We always want to know what's around the next turn, and created that affinity to nature. And I had it. I was very privileged from a father who did that for us, and my whole family was that way inclined. I've got a couple of people here as well, and you can see the folk that have grown up in the bush and learned to really appreciate the finer detail. But I'm not saying anybody can do it, but you've got to open your eyes, and you've got to listen, and you've got to use your senses. It's not always what you see, it's what you hear, it's what you smell. The African bush, we live on an incredible continent, and sometimes I think people, it goes by them so quickly and they don't realize what's around them. If they open their eyes and realize the interaction and what's actually happening, it's an amazing place to live. And then, not to mention the wildlife in Africa is incredible. I often think there's not enough time in the day and not enough time in one's life to do all the exploring one has to do. I'm moving on in years now, but I still think I'm 25-year-old running on the landscape. It's the image in the mirror that doesn't fit what's going on in the body. But But I honestly believe, people ask me, am I going to retire and when am I going to retire? I don't think I'll ever retire. I hope I can continue to just give whatever skills I've got and try and mentor young people and pass on the passion, because the passion is not learnt in a university in a formal education. The passion is learnt in the field and learning to appreciate the smaller things in life. And I'm very grateful for having the family I had and the exposure I had to wildlife areas. Till today still, I live down in a little town called St. Francis. I love the place, but I'm there for 2 days, but I've got to get back into the bush. And I go and explore the Babians or got the garden route nearby, always out in the bush. That's just how we made up, and that's how my family's genetically made up as well.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, John. I feel like time in the bush, for me at least, is you have to learn the intrinsic value of nature through experiencing nature. It doesn't come through any book or any movie you watch. It comes through spending time with nature. That's at least my experience, of like really seeing that connection. It's a tacit. It's like so difficult to describe that relationship and the way you form with it. Is there anything you would say to someone who's living in a very developed world, middle of London, middle of New York City, about Africa and some of the way in which it's been seen? Places like Malawi, people know South Africa for travel. How would you, talk to them about experiencing these parts of the world and how their attention to these parts of the world is fairly relevant, if not urgent?
Yeah, I think generally, and often the marketing around a lot of the reserves is really good, and often the ones that need to be marketed aren't marketed. And I think if I could advise anybody out there, try and get down the road and travel and explore and see some of these hidden gems. And they need support. At the end of the day, if they're not economically viable, it will never succeed. But Africa is an incredibly special place. The people, I would say, the majority of people on the African landscape, and especially Malawi, it's called the warm heart of Africa. It's the one thing that when you come into Malawi is the people, incredibly friendly, and you're safe. You're so safe. It's a highly populated country, but you very quickly learn to fit in and look at it's a sensory overload in its own right. And when you're traveling, it's like you're blown away around every corner and what's taking place in front of you. And what first world societies take for granted and come to a place like this, the little things, people are still playing and enjoying themselves with very, very little, but just enjoying life. And I think that's the takeaway home message. If you come to a place like this, you very quickly realize that all the first world niceties are not really necessary. You can get by without all of that, and you can just learn to be entertained by people again and talk to people and communicate with people and understand that we've got different cultures and different understanding of things. To me, that's an eye-opener. And then it's an added advantage to be able to escape to a reserve or a national park and see the incredible diversity in these parks and the wildlife. There's nothing like this in the world. Hey, it's incredible diversity of animals. And Malawi is definitely putting itself on the map through African parks, and we've got the 3 parks, Luwande, Nkorokoda and Majete, and all of them in various degrees of recovery. Majete is right there. It's an awesome place to come visit. And I think a place like Majete, what needs to be said, every dollar spent here stays in Majete. Nobody's getting rich out of it. It's only there to protect the environment and to uplift communities around the park. In no way, like I started off by saying, we're an NGO that does a non-profit organization, and we're only trying to improve the biodiversity of these protected areas and make sure they're there for future generations.
Yeah. No, thanks, John. It's incredibly inspiring for me, having studied sustainability at various institutions like Sustainability Institute in South Africa and Schumann College in England, where I was like brought into the state of the planet, you know, like that urgency that biodiversity loss is happening at such an increased rate, you know. And I've always had anxiety around sort of how do we connect with nature, but how do we connect like financial mechanisms to biodiversity in Africa specifically while we still have it, you know, the genetic pools of diversity, because sometimes it's actually just not linked, biodiversity and the climate. I mean, it's just not linked in communications. My biggest goal is to try and communicate that climate change is linked to biodiversity loss, you know. A nature reserve provides a microclimate, you know, for clean air, clean water, stuff like that. But so yeah, I also feel super passionate about that. Just coming towards sort of the end of this chat, I just like to sort of hand it over to you just to say if there's any like books or quotes or anything that comes up that, you know, that has touched you in your learning and your journey to engage more with. I know just being in the field is a big one, but if there's anything that you, I don't know, I guess would like to share, I'd like to hear it.
Yeah, look, I think the proof's in the pudding, huh? You come and visit our parks, come and support African parks mostly. I'm not trying to punt African parks only. There's some really good conservation organizations out there. But African Parks is trying, and they're doing a lot of good on the landscape. We've got this saying, and it's think big, start small, act now. And I think it's pretty much the way African Parks adopts things, is thinking big, but you would not do it all in one day. We start small, but we get it done. Anybody coming to Majete 20 years ago and seeing it now, you would not believe what we've done with this place. It's amazing, and it blows the mind. And it's not only because I'm here. I'll be long gone, and I'll still think very fondly of what's going on in Majete. And like I started off by saying, it's resilience, and it gives you hope. Definitely, if there's a product that one needs to try and duplicate, it's the Majete product. And it's not me trying to sell it and trying to get tourists here. From a conservation perspective, it's working. From a community perspective, it's working. And we're slowly but surely getting tourists and responsible tourism, not people out to quickly see the big five. You come here and you know you're investing in conservation when you visit a place like this. You're investing in biodiversity conservation. And that's what we want to see. We want to see responsible tourists and know where their money is going. And they can be proud in a small way that they're actually supporting an effort like this.
Brilliant. No, Sikomo Kombile.
Sikomo Kambili.
Kombile, which means thank you very much in Chichewe. I've learned a little bit of Chichewe. As I said, it's been such a privilege for me to be in this country for the last 3 days. You know, when I drove over that from Mozambique, you know, I was telling John, so I only found out about getting here literally 3 days before arriving in Majete, and I had to travel from Harare through Zambia, through Tet, a town called Tet, big mining town, and then into Malawi, into Majete, and it was a crazy experience, you know, just driving on my own through Africa. But yeah, the warm feeling I got, you know, traveling and being on my own has just been incredible. But yeah, I think the last 4 days has been such a special time for me. Very inspiring to engage with this Keystone project on my trip through Southern Africa. And yeah, I just thank you so much for sort of shedding light on the story of Majete, the warm heart of Africa. And yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, big pleasure, Sam, and safe travels. And yeah, spread the word far and wide, and that's all we can do. Let's think big, start small, and we act now and we do it.
Yeah, I think I'm going to get a bit of a hard lesson on where Malawi is really at, and you know, that's also part of my storytelling. Is, you know, I've got to show the good, potentially show the bad. Deforestation is apparently a huge issue in Malawi, and as you said to me the other day, like, you know, that these areas shouldn't be separate from Lake Malawi and the northern parts, Mount Belangi, you know, package these places. And so hopefully I can get to these places, tell some positive stories, engage with Malawi in general. That's it for me. I'm off. Thank you so much.
Big pleasure.
Ciao, ciao.